Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? This episode's a little bit different. I'm going to give you my opinion for about half of the video, and then halfway through, I will throw it over to a conversation I had with one of my good buddies, Derek Deem, on the Eagles season, on the press conference between Howie Roseman and Doug Pederson as well. So a lot to break down, and essentially the big question is, was this season a success? And there's so many different ways to really view it. I don't think it was successful. It wasn't successful. Date back to August, date back to July, we were having conversations saying, well, we're going to win the Super Bowl. There's no reason to even break down training camp. There's nothing really to even talk about with this team because we know they're stacked. We know they're good. We know they have a good head coach. We have a chance to go to the NFC Championship game to win the Super Bowl. We had that type of expectations for this team. Well, we went 9-7 and lost in a home playoff game in the first round. Now, I always believe that expectations change. It would be ridiculous to just go in with Greg Ward and Burnett and Josh Perkins and think, well, I said they were going to win the Super Bowl anyway, so I can't change my expectations. That's not how this works, right? So, expectations do change throughout the season based on what occurs and injuries that happen and how players are performing and what the team looks like. But I can't say it was successful. I can say, though, that I take pride in this team, that I love what they did. I love their energy. I loved their fight, and I love the way that Doug Pederson coaches in December. I just know it will be elite, and I know it will be at the top of his game because he has shown that so far throughout his career as head coach. That's what he does. It keeps happening year after year. He finds ways to keep this team engaged late, when things are tough, when things are not going as well as they should be. And that is a very, very powerful trait to have. So I take pride in the team. I love the fact that Carson played 16 games. There are many storylines throughout the season that make you excited. Carson Wentz is one of them. Doug Pederson is one of them. Boston Scott, Miles Sanders is definitely one of them. Hell, I can even say Dallas Goedert. I thought Dallas Goedert showed me something through that back stretch when Zach Ertz was getting a little banged up. He is a really solid player, way better than I thought, but he wasn't really getting the chances and opportunities because Zach Ertz is out there. I think Dallas Goedert really showed you something. So there are a ton of things to really take away from this season when it comes to that. But all around, I can't say it was a success. You do realize that there were a lot of moments in this season where it was ugly and putrid. And you can blame that on Nelson Aguilar. You can change that on the drama with Alshon Jeffrey as well. But it happened. It happened. This season was a nightmare at times. The controversy in the locker room, losing to Minnesota. Then you had some really awful games, getting blown out against Dallas. And I'm not telling you that every season you should never have a bad game. Bad games happen all the time in a season. Look what happened to the Patriots. They lost to the Dolphins to lose their home field. Bad losses happen all the time in a season. Even do good teams. Teams don't finish 16-0. You know, the good teams in this league, 13-3, 12-4. Losses are going to happen. It's not about that. But when you go 9-7, it happened more than it should have, obviously. The Miami Dolphins lost for the Eagles. So there were some times, Seattle, New England, where Carson Wentz did not look good. There were some times where Doug Pederson lost a lot of his touch and lost a lot of his creativity. So you can't forget about what actually occurred just because it ended very well. On a positive note, let's say. You can give them all the praise in the world for their battle, for their fight, for the fact that they left everything out there on the field, where they gave us every last drip of sweat that dropped on the Lincoln Financial Field. But there were some ugly, ugly moments that I can't just wash away. Some of it was Carson Wentz, which hurts me to say because I love Carson. I'm a big Carson supporter, but there were some things mechanically that looked awful. There was a confidence issue that played a factor, and look what happens when the personnel changed. So was it as simple as him and some of the personnel did not get along and did not trust each other? Yeah, it's a possibility. I want to see what Carson Wentz can be when he actually has weapons, when he has real wide receivers, when he has players who are capable of making plays at a higher level. You saw what happened when McCown was in with these practice squad guys. They weren't as effective, and there's a reason behind that. So I want to see what Carson Wentz can be. It's not fair to judge him totally based off that brutal 4-game stretch that he had in the middle of the season, but it happened. You can't throw it away. Jim Schwartz, it's hard to really yell at him because he had some awful personnel players to really scheme with. And I'll always say this about Jim Schwartz. His numbers say a lot. It's not pretty to the eye. He does allow a lot of third down conversions at times. Well, really, that just happened with Seattle. But he plays the stick defense. Like, it doesn't look appealing to the eyes when it comes to how it's being played, but it's effective. You're not allowing a lot of points. At home, he's tremendous. He's number 1 in defense and in points per game at home since 2016, including the playoffs. Like, these are real numbers. These are telling you something. So it's hard for me to say Jim Schwartz had a bad year. I thought he had a really good year, arguably one of his best seasons, and that's even including a season with the Super Bowl, and that's just based off the fact that he was less stubborn. He was throwing in different looks. He was being a different type of guy. He wasn't afraid to dial up new things. We haven't really seen that out of Schwartzy, so I can't yell at him. Which I can kind of fast forward that to that press conference that I talked about that occurred. Jim Schwartz was brought up with Doug Pederson. I just thought it was very interesting the way Doug Pederson answered. He was pretty set on saying that the wide receivers coach would be back. Mike Rowe would be back as offensive coordinator. When Jim Schwartz was brought up, it wasn't the same energy, and then he somewhat backtracked on his answer about Mike Rowe and the wide receiver coach, talking about how they're still going to address this thing and assess the situation. Just very, very interesting. Nothing splashed at the press conference, just a couple interesting things. Howie was asked about J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and he looked very prepared for the answer. He knew something like that was going to come. He had a really funny answer about how he thought someone called him and said he would be Rookie of the Year. Yeah, okay, Howie. Someone called him after one of the preseason games and said he's going to be Rookie of the Year. Okay, not buying that. But the Malcolm thing was brought up. The Jason Peters thing was brought up. And we know it's going to be a hard decision for upper management to come up with a game plan on what they're going to have to do moving forward. But it was pretty basic for the most part. One thing he brought up, Howie Roseman, was the fact that he was very active at the deadline. And Minkah Fitzpatrick came up as someone who they would make a trade for, and Jalen Ramsey as well. But once the price tags got a little steep, he decided to back off. Now, Fitzpatrick, for a first-round draft pick, it's someone that I would consider because we are talking about moving on from Malcolm Jenkins, and he is a player that is a stud in this league. But is safety the most important position right now? It's one of them. It's absolutely one of them, especially if you do move on from Malcolm Jenkins. But let's not act like there aren't more holes to fill. I'm okay with the way they went. I've been saying this all season long when everyone was pissed off and so emotional about the trade deadline and not making moves. I sat back and said, listen, you're gonna appreciate it when we have those draft picks. We are. Now you got to hit on those draft picks, and then everyone throws out there where Howie Roseman can't draft. He can. He misses on some, absolutely. More than he should miss, yes. But he drafted Miles Sanders. He drafted Dallas Goedert. He drafted Andre Dillard. And I know the story is still out on Andre Dillard. It's not written yet. We don't know 100%, but it looks like he can be real promising. And Avonte Maddox was drafted in the 4th round, and I know he's not no elite corner, but when you put him in the slot, I think he makes a ton of plays, and he is beneficial. You need to upgrade on the outsides, and I don't think he can play outside, but inside, he does a good job. I'm just saying, I give him more. It's the same thing with Brett Brown. He doesn't draft well enough, okay? He doesn't draft well enough, but saying he can't draft at all isn't fair because he does hit on some guys. He needs to hit on more, but he does hit on some guys. It's not as if he goes 0 for 100. But I'm okay with keeping the draft picks. I'm okay with not giving up that much for Jalen Ramsey because we need to fix a lot with this roster. So Howie was talking about that. He was talking about adding youth, and when it comes to the injuries, hope is not the strategy that they are trying to go with when it comes to keeping guys healthy and hoping and praying that nothing goes wrong. That's not the right mindset to have. So nothing crazy that pops out, but just some interesting conversation. They brought up Alshon Jeffrey and what he brought to the table and how good he is. They kind of have their hands tied behind their back when it comes to Alshon because what are you going to do? What are you going to do? He's hurt. You can't cut him. And if he was healthy, the dead cap number was a lot. No one's going to trade for him now. So you're kind of stuck with Alshon, which concerns me because I think that there is an issue with him. I think that is the problem. I think Alshon Jeffrey is the problem. They kind of put on a fake smile around each other. I just sense it because, the Josina thing comes out. That is the connection between the two. And I even heard some reports from some beat guys saying, yeah, there is something there. There is a disconnect between Alshon and Carson Wentz. And that's noticeable at times. So. It's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy to think that's where we are right now with that. But it is where we are right now with that. So pretty much when I look at this season as a whole, I love what they showed me. I'm very proud of Carson Wentz and these practice squad guys. I mean, come on, you got to give them a ton of credit. We never heard of any of these players. Greg Ward, he could be fighting for a legit spot. Now, this is my thing with Greg Ward. Greg Ward is a nice Mac Hollins guy, right? Mac Hollins position guy. Fourth wide receiver. Like, that's where he needs to be, which would really be, or third wide receiver, right? But when you have Miles Sanders, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, a better wide receiver that hopefully they draft in the first round, now he's your fifth or sixth option. That's Greg Ward. Greg Ward is not a number one guy. He's not a number two guy. If he's your third wide receiver and he's your fifth or sixth option, that's fine. And good for Greg Ward for creating that type of spot for him. He's going to have the opportunity to come back and battle for a spot. Absolutely. So good for Greg Ward. Some of these other guys, yeah, they might not be able to crack it next season, but they all deserve a chance. And I give them a ton of credit for stepping up and putting us in a position to host a playoff game. 5-7. The Eagles were 5-7. You absolutely need to remember that they were 5-7 and they underachieved and they did not play good enough. You can't cut that part out of the season, but you give them credit for digging themselves out of a hole that they put themselves into to an extent. They somewhat dug themselves out of the hole. To dig themselves out, they would have won the Super Bowl or went to the NFC Championship with that roster. They somewhat dug themselves out. They got themselves halfway out. They got their hands up top and they're pulling themselves out, but someone was up top and they had their shoe on the fingertips and pushed them back down. It's weird though, because you remember what happened last, and I'm not taking away what they did last. But I'm sorry, I can't go to the extreme of saying it was a success now that, it has ended a couple days ago. You take a few deep breaths, you look at what happened. It could be a blessing in disguise that some of this happened because the organization needed a wake up. They needed to get shaken up, smacked in the face, and say, we got to redo this thing. Not rebuild, just redo some things. Get younger. And it's funny, I say get younger, but we need to bring Malcolm back at the same time because I believe you can bring Malcolm Jenkins back and get younger in other positions, including safety. Get another safety in here that can be molded behind Malcolm Jenkins. And then figure out the safety position when Malcolm Jenkins starts leaving. That's a spot where I think it's okay to keep an older guy. He's 32. He's not 35. He's 32. Does he have a lot of miles on the tires? Absolutely. But this guy is too important in the locker room and what he does on the field, playing all the snaps, being so versatile, different positions, and special teams. So there we have it. At this moment, I am going to throw it over to the conversation with me and my good buddy, Derek DeMaria. I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much. Joining me now is Derek DeMaria, the Deem. That's what we call him, the Deem. Talking some Eagles football, and the season ended. It hurt. It was very emotional. We'll start this off nice and simple. What are your takeaways from the season? Is it successful? Was it a successful season for the Birds?
Well, first off, Broads, thanks for having me on. Always great talking sports with you. We're usually firing the text back and forth no matter what game's going on, but we can kind of get it all out here in a words, a little debate back and forth. But, it's tough because you got to be happy they got in, but at the end of the day, I can't look at it as a super success just because they're fed stuff early in the year to believe that they were better than they were. But just looking at where the roster was day one, there's just so much more hope for this team, and then it's just, injuries hurt, but it just sucks because there's so much talent, and a lot of that talent was what went down and with the injuries. But I just can't see a first round exit as a success with where they were in the preseason, kind of going into week one.
I absolutely agree. It's funny, when we were in August and in July, I remember making so much content and even hearing sports talk radio. Oh, we don't even need to talk about the Eagles. We know what they are. We know what kind of team they're going to be. And it's just crazy that we are now sitting here prideful, I guess is the word we can use.
Yeah, I mean, you're happy they got in, but at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's cool to see Greg Ward and Boston Scott do all these things. I think it's good. It's important because I think they're two guys that probably played their way onto the roster next year and will help you with flexibility, being that there's cheap kind of producers on your roster where you can kind of add some stuff around them. But it kind of also makes you mad. It's like, why were they not there from day one? Like, maybe you're a better team if you don't pay Darren Sproles and Boston Scott is in that role from the start. And just, I don't know. It's weird. And yeah, it's great they got in, but at the end of the day, like, I can only take so much from the beating the Redskins and the Giants twice. The Cowboys win was a good win, but it's not like you went out there and exactly beat the top teams in the league with the practice squad players per se.
Absolutely. And here's one thing that I always stand by. We both love Doug Pederson. There's no denying Doug Pederson is a good head coach in this league, and there's something to be said about December, Doug. But we can't live by this way every single year. If we're 5 years into Doug Pederson's tenure and we're 5-7 halfway through the season, and then we make the playoffs, we can't be doing this.
We just won't be here because we'll end up having too much strain put on our hearts. We'll be leaving this earth earlier than we're supposed to. Like, what happened to that 13-3 year where we just kind of coasted in and all you're worrying about is playoff seeding? And I always just think back to like New England, and it's just like, they're never in this position. Even this year, they were supposed to be so bad. They were 12-4, and I mean, yeah, they lost to Miami and it screwed them. But just like a team like that, like, just give me something easy for once. Like, I can't just keep scratching and clawing every year. But it did show. I mean, it shows Doug can coach. But what kind of makes me mad is like, he coached really well at the end of the year, but like, there's those spots in the beginning of the year and that midway point where we're like, kind of like, what's going on? And like, I think there's like a total different side of like creativity from the offense with the younger guys, and I don't understand why you couldn't still have that creativity with the guys who are there. And I know like your personnel changed a little bit. Boston Scott let you run the screen game a little more than a guy like Jordan Howard and so on, stuff like that. But like, I don't know, just getting Carson out of the pocket, some of the play design just seemed like it was so much more innovative because it had to be. And then you're finding ways to get Greg Ward and Burnett and Perkins involved. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just simply because Burnett could catch the ball and Nelson Aguilar can't. But it's like, why can't you find a way to get Aguilar down the field? Or why can't you find this play or that play? Which is just kind of frustrating. It was just like, it was almost like we thought we could just do what we needed to do to get by with the talented guys. And it was like, all right, now we've really got to coach up the younger guys. It's like, no, you got to be creative and coach up the talented guys as well. Like,
yeah, it's whenever Doug has his hands tied behind his back, that's when he does his best coaching. And
yeah, we see him like pull out all the stops, and it's like, pull them out from day one. Like, I promise you, if you use a play in week 2, like, you can still use it in week 11. Like, just because a team might say it doesn't mean you still can't use it.
Now, what did you think about the way Doug coached? We'll get into the press conference, but I just want to get your thoughts on the way he coached at the end of the game, because I thought he did a good job of keeping the team in reach, and then when he needed to be aggressive, the aggressive Doug Pederson came out. So I was okay with going for it on the 4th and 4 with 6 minutes to go. The play worked too. I mean, it was a play that could have worked. Yeah. It just wasn't executed. So I'm not mad about the way Doug coached that game. You can't be.
Yeah, no, I'm not mad. I think there's probably some, now, I take a couple days and step back, and I thought he probably should have kicked the field goal at the time. And it's kind of like a 50-50. Like some moments I'm like, he probably should have kicked it. And other times, going for it's not bad. And, that's what we always talk about. That's how he coaches. The one thing that I kind of keep looking back on that I think he should have done differently, I think was a huge turning point in the game, was when they took the delay game on the 2-yard line. And when it happened, I thought, the clock's running down. I was like, let's not waste the time out here. Whether you're on the 2 or the 7, you're probably going to get in. And with Carson Wentz, that's the case. But with McCown in the game, I think you might have to just use the timeout there because you're 1st and goal from the 2. You probably can run it 3 times and get in. With Wentz, I think whether you're on the 1 or the 7 or the 2, he's going to find a way to get that touchdown. And I get it was early in the 3rd quarter and you didn't want to burn that timeout because it ended up helping you. Had the 3 late, and if you stop the deep ball to Metcalf, you're getting the ball back. But at the same time, it was like you don't have Carson Wentz in there. You probably just want to try to get that touchdown when you can because you don't know if you're going to get down there again. And I know he was probably assuming McCown could get it in from the 7. but he couldn't, obviously.
Josh
And,
McCown.
and I mean, he gave us all he could. And, Doug was limited with what he could do. And you could see as soon as McCown came in, those practice squad receivers, their kind of level came back down where you could really tell it was Carson Wentz that was making those guys rise to the play they were playing. And you put him in there as a 40-year-old guy that, hasn't played since week 2. And, I mean, the guy goes out and ends up making a good pass, and he literally just, pulls his hamstring because he's so old that he couldn't even throw across his body without hurting himself.
He was running down the right sideline. It was a play designed for him to run the ball. He was running down 10 yards, a gain of first. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, Josh McCown read option, pulling it out of the running back's gut and taking it off. And, it was crazy because you see, actually, he did have the ability to move a little bit. Like I was saying, he's a guy like Eli Manning. The difference is, he can't move. He'll just get sacked. McCown could move, and it was working. And then as soon as that hamstring or glute muscle, whatever it was, got torqued, it was just you could tell he was a different guy. He couldn't move as well, and it kind of just – I think there was one play late. He was kind of going off to the right side, and I think he was going to be able to scramble for maybe a first down, and you could tell he knew he just didn't have it in him and ended up throwing it away or making a bad pass, where I think if he was 100%, he might have picked up the first down. It would have been different. At the end of the day, even if they scored, they were still going to have to get that 2-point conversion, so who knows what was going to happen down there. I would have liked to see maybe 1 or 2 trick plays or just try something. I don't know. I thought at some point we'd probably see Greg Ward try to let one fly on a reverse, and if there was ever a time to do it, it was going to be then with McCown in the game. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess
especially because we saw
who's he going to throw it to?
Yeah, we saw. Yeah, very true. We saw Greg Ward out of the Wildcat formation earlier. 2 games ago?
Yeah,
so I thought maybe they'd bring back the same package and it would be a throw. But let's get on to the press conference with Doug and Howie Roseman. It wasn't anything insane. It wasn't as if anything was very shocking. But there were some very interesting things that were said, and I guess I'll start with Howie Roseman's comments on Alshon Jeffrey. He didn't really give much in terms of, what he thinks about moving forward with him. He just praised what type of guy he is. He's a good teammate. He's a very productive teammate. He was talking about, his game against Miami and the plays against the Saints where he dropped the football in the playoffs and just what he brought to the table in 2017. So the way Howie was talking about him, it could just be GM speak right now, but it seems as if, I know he has the injury, so they're limited on what he can do, but it seems as if, that they're just riding with Alshon, and that's kind of what they have to do with the injury, but, it seems as if they're just staying positive with him and making it not a big deal that he's still going to be in the locker room.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, they can't cut him while he has the injury, and the cap number is so large that, I mean, he's a good player at this point, but I don't see teams knocking down the door to trade for him, so unless you can move his salary in a trade, I personally don't think it makes any sense to eat a salary and not have him on the roster. I mean, if you're going to pay him, you might as well have him there. He can still produce. And if you lose him, you lose Aguilar. I mean, you bring Deshaun back next year, but he's going to give you 7 games, 8 games. You can't count on him to give you 14, 15, 16 games. And you just can't try to bring in 5 new receivers. At some point, I mean, if you draft a guy in the first round, come back with your first round draft pick, Ward, Deshaun, Alshon, and a 5th guy, I feel pretty comfortable with that. But my thing is,
Alshon even going to be able to play? I mean, we're talking halfway through the season, probably.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I guess you'll have to wait to see when that, how that all heals and everything. And everybody heals different. We saw Jalen Mills miss a ton of time, and who knows? I mean, I don't think Alshon's going to try to play through it early in the year, like he did with the shoulder in the Super Bowl year in 2017. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because you can't cut him, and I just don't, unless you can get a team to take half his money in a trade. I don't know. I think they're better with him than without him for the time being, and you're just going to have to ride it out and hope you get the most out of him for one more year.
Yeah, before the injury happened, I was under the impression that I would eat the dead cap. I would pull with Pittsburgh Steelers and say, this guy's a problem. I mean, I still think he is some sort of an issue inside that locker room.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably something there.
Yeah, it's a very weird situation. But how about going to Doug Pederson's comments about Mike Rowe and the wide receivers coach Carson Walsh? It seems like those 2 guys will be returning. Now, it's funny. As Eagles fans, we've been screaming for Mike Rowe's head for a long time because we saw no creativity with the offense. And now that there's some creativity. I mean, the thing is, what is Mike Rowe? How much say does he have when it comes to being an offensive coordinator when Dougie P is the offensive mind to this structure? So, I guess I'm not surprised with any of it. Maybe the wide receivers coach surprises me just because of everything that went down. But if you're bringing in practice squad guys that are producing, you got to praise him as much as you were ripping him apart for guys like Nelson and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside not being able to catch.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Doug's the offensive guy. I think there's better options out there, but if that's what they feel comfortable with, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want to have turnover and change year in and year out because it's just going to be harder to, stay consistent. So maybe he feels like they just need to stay consistent for another year, see what grows, maybe he sees him growing a little bit towards the end of the year. And with the wide receivers coach, I mean, at the end of the day, it might just come down to like, Nelson Aguilar can't catch, and Arcega-Whiteside's just not very good.
I'm not believing you.
And, Alshon Jeffrey, like, he's, a 10-year veteran at this point. He is who he is. You're not changing, the type of player he is. And, yeah, we saw some of these guys, whether it be Burnett or Ward, Rob Davis made a catch and got called back. But maybe the younger guys, listen to him a little more accepting what they're doing. But I think the biggest thing is just keeping that consistency. You don't want to have that turnover. And I just get maybe Grow just starting to learn, and maybe they'll give Deuce a little more say and some stuff like that.
I thought Deuce had a great back half there.
The only thing that scares me, I just don't know if Grow kind of has that intensity and has that fire where he's going to kind of keep Doug in check. Like we always hear, like Frank Reich kind of kept Doug in check, making sure he ran the ball and stuff like that. And as Carson grows, I think he's going to even become more of like an offensive type guy. As your quarterback keeps growing and growing, he gets more of a say in everything. And at this point, it's hard to know because you don't know who's going to be there at personnel and everything. We're kind of just going to have to wait it out and see what happens. But at Doug, how Doug's that kind of guy. I don't think he really wants to fire people or hang guys out to dry, and he's going to try to give guys their opportunity to do what they can do.
Definitely. And when he was asked about those questions, Jim Schwartz came up, and it was weird. It was almost a little snippy, and the way he responded, the way I interpreted it, at least, maybe I'm wrong, but the way I listened to Doug Pederson answer the question about Jim Schwartz, it was brought up with a question saying, well, you mentioned, and he mentioned Mike Rowe and the wide receivers coach. What about Jim Schwartz? And the way Doug Pederson answers it, I know what I said, but things can change. I'm still addressing who's out there. So it was almost as if he was backtracking, saying that those two guys were definitely going to be there. Did I interpret that the wrong way?
No, yeah. So it was definitely weird. So he basically answered the first question about the offensive coaches and said basically, yes, Grow and Carson Walch will be back. Then they asked him about Schwartz, and he said, like, we're still assessing everything. And they kind of followed up with like, so you said the two offensive guys will be back, but you didn't just flat out say Schwartz will be back. Why aren't you saying that? And then he said, well, we're assessing everything. I know what I said. Everybody's here right now is then what he started to say. And it was just weird because it was like, I don't know. Like, I know, you can be up and down on Schwartz, and a lot of our fans can be up and down on Schwartz. But my thing is, like, I always try to equate this, and I always kind of use this with all the fire Brett Brown pitchfork people. It's like, until you can give me a name of someone better or more qualified, then put it to rest. And I just don't see, Wade Phillips is out there, but he's a 3-4 guy, and you're going to have to change your whole scheme. You're going to, have to add, we have no linebacker, so we can barely play 1, let alone 4. And we don't have a defensive line that's set up for 3 linemen. So it'd be a weird situation. And besides Wade Phillips, I don't see a guy out there that's more qualified than Jim Schwartz. And, I saw like stats yesterday that the Eagles they gave up the fewest points per game at home since Jim Schwartz has been there, and something like 20 points per game total since he's been there, which is like top 5 in the league. And they did do a really good job in 2017. There were games where they were giving up 3, 6, 10 points. And so that brings it down a little bit. Like, he also did give up 30 to Miami, or almost 40 to Miami. But I don't know. We've seen that depleted defense, depleted offense. I think he did the best he could. We played the Dallas game, and you got Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas and those guys making plays. So, like, obviously it's working. And even we've seen some young linemen make some strides, and Sweat played better. The couple tackles played well. Anthony Rush and Huggins.
Yeah.
Those guys played well. So, I mean, obviously he's getting something out of him. I think he just needs some better personnel. I mean, when you give a defensive coordinator no linebackers, it's tough. I mean, that's the middle of your defense. And Nigel Bradham's a tackle machine, but I don't know if he could run with me or you, let alone run with athletic running backs and linebackers.
Absolutely.
And Grugier Hill, I think he's improved, but he's been hurt. And then I saw some stat yesterday about Nate Jerry missed every fifth tackle he had an attempt on, and that was the second worst rate in the NFL.
Wow.
So yeah, it was like I don't know the exact stat, but yeah, it was like he literally missed every fifth tackle, and
That's
there's actually
hilarious.
some games where I thought he played well, but
I agree for what he is.
Yeah, I mean,
for what he is.
But yeah, well, this is an organization that's never really valued linebackers. I don't think they've had like a Pro Bowl linebacker in how many years. And
Right. No, I'm with you. I'm with you when it comes to Jim Schwartz. The thing is, to the eye, it's not pretty, but to the stats, it works. So it's like that's why the fan base gets so disappointed with him, because the thing I'll say about the last game against the Seahawks is, yeah, they let up 17 points, but they also allowed a lot of third and longs and things like that.
And
like you're
some
working
of
with
that,
nobodies.
and some of that too. At the end of the day, it's like Jim Schwartz can call and put guys in position, but like when it's 3rd and 14, like if you just get burnt off the line of scrimmage, like if DK Metcalf, he's just bigger and stronger than Devontae Maddox. Like if he beats him, he beats him. Like the coach can't go out there like it's the same thing like I keep saying with Brett Brown. Like if Ben Simmons doesn't shoot the ball, he won't shoot the ball. You can't make him. Like if Sidney Jones physically just can't cover another guy, it's not the coach's fault.
Well, he was on the last play, Epps. I mean, I'm like, Epps is trying to defend this guy.
And
There's
like,
no shot.
So like that's a play where I don't like. I thought that was a bad call by Schwartz. I'm just
It
not
was.
going
It
zero
was.
blitz there, especially a guy like Wilson. He's going to get the ball out. He knows what he's doing. But yeah, for the most part, I think you got to play with the deck and the hand you're dealt, and I think he's done a good job. I think seeing Fletcher Cox kind of get healthy at the end of the year just changed the whole defense. We're starting to finally get that push up the middle.
Well, you mentioned Fletcher Cox. We might as well just go to Malcolm Jenkins real quick. Are you bringing him back?
I don't see how you can't.
I agree.
It's so tough because it's like you do need to add so much to this roster, and he is an aging player, and you can't tie up all your money in quarterback and a couple other positions. But like without Malcolm Jenkins in your defense, like what are you? Like
I agree. He does so
everything.
much.
He's down the line, stopping the run. I mean, he's your captain of your defense. He's probably the number one captain of your team. And he deserves it. I mean, the guy's played every snap for 2 straight years, so he has every right to walk in there and say, hey, I'm 32 years old. I'm not playing on a 1-year deal, and I deserve more money. Like, people can get mad and say, oh, he's greedy, he's this, he's that. But, like, at the end of the day, he does. Like, I've literally played every single play, not counting I also play special teams. Like, the guy deserves it. I mean, he's been nothing but a class act since he's been here, and he is, I mean, you got Cox and him are the face of that defense.
Well, we talk about getting younger, right? And that's why everyone's skeptical on doing this. Oh, you need to know when to cut the ties. But here's the thing. You can do both. And I heard Jeff Mosher talking about this on 97.3 ESPN. It's like you can find a way to bring back Malcolm Jenkins, but you can also draft a safety that will play a lot of snaps and play with Malcolm Jenkins, under Malcolm Jenkins, and you can build him and mold him to be the next Malcolm Jenkins. Like, we don't have anyone to be in that spot. So instead of trying to fill the void of Malcolm, bring Malcolm back, find a way to make him happy, get younger in every other position, still find a safety that doesn't need to play as much as Malcolm, but you can groom him to be that eventually, and get younger in other positions, because we're going to have to draft a lot of young guns, and that's why Howie's talking about having a lot of assets to make those draft picks, and we can kind of snowball right into that conversation. I thought he had a hilarious statement about J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and how he received a phone call after a preseason game saying this guy's going to be Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I think he might have butt dialed himself and left himself a voicemail. He said, hey, Howie, it's Howie. You did really good, and this guy's going to be great. And did you see when Sudfeld threw him the ball and they're playing the Ravens practice squad guys and he had a couple catches? Yeah, that was just an absurd statement. But I just want to touch on something you just mentioned real quick about the Malcolm Jenkins thing. And it's almost kind of like what they did with Dillard. They took Dillard in the first round, but still brought back Jason Peters, basically as he's an extra lineman and could learn under a guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer. So it's kind of almost that same situation, what they did last year, and Dillard should be ready to go, and I don't think Peters will be back. But yeah, the Arcega-Whiteside thing, I mean, that's just Howie is in a tough position today because it's just like, you just basically have to go up there and just admit, like,
He knew
I
it
was
was coming.
wrong. Yeah,
He
like,
was prepared.
There's 10 guys that just outperformed that. I mean, were drafted in the same round, the next round, the fourth round, the fifth round, the sixth round, that were just substantially better. Like, it's not even like it was comparable. I mean, Metcalf, AJ Brown, McLaurin, like all these guys. And it's just like, there's games where Arcega-Whiteside just wasn't even getting a target. And then, like, I don't know.
There were games I didn't even know if he played. I had to go back and look at the snap counts,
like,
and he was like 28 or 30%. I'm like, wow, really?
Yeah, and then it's just like, sometimes you just got to kind of admit you're wrong and stick your foot in your mouth and just like, don't make that comment because, dude, you're in Philadelphia. You're getting eaten alive. Like, I haven't listened to the radio since, but I'm sure that clip is going to be played over and over and over. And like, why are we believing guys might be offensive rookie of the years after a preseason game? And then it's funny because Miles Sanders ends up being the guy who ended up making the run at offensive rookie of the year.
Right. Yeah, right. The same exact team. That is funny. But yeah, I mean, all around, to sum this up, there were some interesting comments, but nothing crazy. Just having a little fun with what they broke down. But all around, I guess the moral of the story is we can be prideful on what they did and how they ended the season, and we love the way that they fight, and we love the way that they play in December, and even though they're 5-7, they're going to continue to battle. But when you look at what we expected earlier in the offseason, like I guess later in the offseason, towards August and all of that, we expected a Super Bowl, and we did not get that Super Bowl. We were not close. We win the division with 9 wins. I remember hearing, people talking about 13, 12, that type of number when it comes to wins. So we can be prideful, but there's a lot to fix. There's a lot of holes that have to be retooled, and that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a fan, yeah, I'm happy they got in the playoffs. They won the division. The Cowboys didn't. We got an extra week of football. We got a home playoff game, and I think you can't, hindsight's 2020, but I think if Carson Wentz finishes that game, we might be getting ready for another game this week, and you just never know. That's what sucks. And this whole thing about Carson getting that playoff experience, and we were all fired up that he was going to get it, and it gets taken away from him, and it sucks. But yeah, I can't say it was a successful season just because I thought we'd be a top 1, 2, 3 seed in this conference coming into this playoffs, and we weren't. And then to see the Saints go down and kind of a path maybe even being put out there where you could get a home NFC championship game somehow with the Vikings back here. And it was just like almost too good to be true. And then it was just, just wasn't meant to be. But I mean, you learn some things. I think actually the injuries ended up helping because I think it's going to show you some things that you wouldn't have seen. Example with Miles Sanders, I think he almost proved that he's going to be your every down back. And I don't see Jordan Howard being back on this team next year. I think he's a good player, but I just think for the price he'll cost, and he's not going to want to split carries. I think he could start for someone. And if he never went down, you probably don't learn as much about Miles Sanders, and you don't learn about Boston Scott. So, we learned about Greg Ward. So that was very beneficial. And I think even though it sucks that we didn't do what we were going to do, I think it actually may have helped us for the next, 1, 2, 3 years, just kind of blazing a path down the road.
No, I absolutely agree. I think it's a blessing in disguise that this all happened because this team needed a retool. They needed a different look. They needed to get younger. They needed a lot of different things. And without all of that playing out the way that it did, we would never know. So with that being said, Deem, I want to thank you for hopping on. It was a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a good time talking sports with Broads and breaking down our Eagles and whoever else we need to talk about.
Well, soon we'll be doing the Phillies because I'm pissed off, Deem. I'm pissed off. It's going to be a nightmare season, I'm telling you.
Why? They haven't signed a guy in like 6 weeks. You don't think they need to keep getting better?
Nick Pavetta's in the starting row. Either Nick Pavetta or Vince Velasquez is our starting 5th guy. All right.
Hey, maybe they'll turn around a new pitching coach.
Oh, stop it. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. And we will see you in another one.